This might be enough for Peters here.
10-9
10-9 suited. It plays pretty well when you jam here against some hands that call you. Like, you know, ace, jack, ace, queen. I mean, you're live at least. Taking the blind sucks. Peters passes it up. Next hand, he's going to have to put a third of his chips in the middle. So
Ace queen for Mateos.
yeah, it wouldn't have gotten through Adrian. The 10-9 of hearts. Ace queen would have picked him off.
Yes, very much so. 8-9 suited in the small for Patrick. The covering stack, speculative holding.
Out of position, getting decent odds. Yeah, I kind of like this pass, actually. I mean, he covers, but I mean, these guys have like 20 big blinds effective or something. They're not deep.
So into the bin it went.
More speculative suited connectors go down in value quite a bit there, and being out of position kind of sucks. So
we are playing at the final table of a $30,000 buy-in tournament that Triton Poker put on recently. They have amazing tournaments. Make sure you check them out. We see perhaps a nitty fold from David Peters with 10-9 of hearts. An early position, 9-handed, playing very shallow, about 5 or 6 big blinds. This is a spot where I think a lot of people automatically rip it in, and that would be a mistake. Suited connectors aren't where they used to be. Over round to Adrian Mateos. He is playing 5 million chips deep at 125, 250K. He raises to 500K, 2 big blinds. Then Patrick Antonius in the small blind with 9-8 of diamonds. Also, folds. Suited connectors aren't where they used to be. Phil Ivey in the big blind, playing relatively shallow stacked, 2 million chips deep, so only about 8 big blinds, defends the big blind with the 7-6 offsuit. And depending on how short the other various short stacks are at this final table, this could easily be a fold, assuming your main goal is to make money. Turns out collecting payout jumps at the final table is very valuable, especially if you are one of the short stacks. I'm not sure of the other stacks at the table, so this call could be perfectly fine, or maybe losing a little bit of money. That said, if your goal is to win the tournament, you need to get in there and get some chips in battle. Ivy likes to win. Let's head to the flop.
Phil defending with a modest holding here.
King 8-7, bottom pair, ahead of ace high.
Yeah, this is Phil. Again, this hand and another. It's like so many different things. Like Peters jams under the gun sometimes with 10-9, and now we're running this flop on 10-9 versus ace-queen. Phil Ivey out of there. Ivy doesn't always defend, but now Ivy did defend, and he flops bottom pair.
Yeah, finds himself in front, facing the 250K c-bet from El Conquistador.
In a pot that could get interesting, Mateos has an interesting combo.
The flop comes king 8-7. Mateos has the ace high. Phil Ivey has bottom pair bad kicker. Ivy checks. Mateos bets 1 big blind, as you should often do when you're facing a player who has a really, really tiny stack. Ivy opts to call, which is also probably what is ideal in this scenario. Feels pretty dicey to call with a hand like 7-6 on king 8-7, because quite often if your opponent just keeps betting, you're going to have to fold. But you're getting amazing odds. What can you do? Call and go to the turn.
Maybe do some bluffing as we go. And I mean, this is the kind of run out where El Conquistador might get frisky with it.
He might start conquisting?
Yeah. I mean, he's got some pretty clean overcard outs versus a 7 or 8 that get sticky. He's blocking the king-queen.
The turn is the 3 of spades. Phil Ivey checks, and Mateos has to figure out if he should bluff, and he opts not to. And I think that's a good decision. When the turn brings a complete brick, at this point, given Ivy has about 70% pot size bet remaining, maybe a little bit more than that, 80% pot size bet remaining, this is a spot where I don't think Ivy's going to fold any pair. So while you do get him to fold out some draws, quite often those draws are just going to check and lose on the river. And obviously Mateos beats all the busted draws. So I think this is a fine spot just to check it back. I don't think there's much merit in bluffing with this ace-queen. If Mateos had a much weaker hand, like Jack 10, perhaps that would be an okay hand to bluff, because then you could get Ivy off of random queen high maybe ace high if he somehow has it pre-flop, and maybe that starts to gain a little bit of merit. That said, this is a spot where I don't think Ivey's going to fold any pair, so there's no point in bluffing with a hand that beats all the draws but loses to all the pairs. Let's go to the river.
Okay, yeah, he not saying it was obligatory by any means to keep bluffing, but it's something that we may be going to see there sometimes.
Knuckles back, holds nut no pair. Obviously, some of those combos in the form of 9-10, Jack-9, Jack-10 have all arrived.
His hand has very little showdown here because Ivey doesn't really have too many ace highs. A lot of draws got there, and if Ivey somehow had like 9-6 or 9-5 or 5-6, he would bluff. So even though it looks like, oh, nut no pair, I mean, this isn't like a blind versus blind situation. So Adrian definitely might turn this into a bluff. He kind of has to go for a bigger sizing. You're kind of basically saying you check back a king or you hit the jack type of sizing probably. So it'd be like probably like a milli-ish. Let's see if he does it. I wouldn't go so big here that you can't have a jack, because, I mean, especially his hand has relevant blockers to the jack, like ace jack, queen jack, that can all value bet the river. You're beating an 8 or a 7. Yeah, oh, and yeah, he's going even bigger. He's going for all of it. See, this is a high-level bluff here. And I thought maybe he was going to do that on... The jack is a pretty good card for his range and a pretty good card for him to do it with.
Sub 1 SPR, the effective amount they're playing for. Ivey with 1-5, and now asking himself whether or not this generally regarded as credible bet check bet line by the pre-flop opener is attached to better than a pair of 7s.
The river is the jack of hearts. Phil Ivey checks, and Mateos decides to put Ivey in. At this point, he realizes that an 8 and a 7 and a random 3 just got a whole lot worse. Plus, Mateos could easily have a king or a jack in this situation that would want to go for full value. I presume Mateos would think that Ivey would check raise the flop with a lot of his kings, jam with a lot of them pre-flop, or bet with them on the river. So Mateos can start to remove a lot of the king X from Ivey's range, which will allow Mateos to make this all in with a hand like a jack, which of course he'd bet the flop with and then check the turn. So I like this bluff. The one concern here is that if Mateos is bluffing this hand that does beat all the busted draws, perhaps he's bluffing too often, which, you know, could be fine, especially if you can actually narrow down Ivey's range, which maybe you can, maybe you can't, given Ivey is one of the best poker players to ever live. So he goes for the bluff. Let's see if Ivey can find the hero call.
Now, this is a spot where Ivey really gets to show. I mean, this is like the longtime player. We got to the river. Lots of logic points. Pre-flop, flop, turn, river, looking at our opponent across the board. Can he figure it out? I mean, 7-6 is beating 0 value, obviously.
While Ivey is thinking, what I want to know is that if you prefer watching the old school players like Phil Ivey, Phil Hellmuth, Dale Negreanu, players like that, or if you like watching the new school players like Adrian Mateos, David Peters, and Justin Saliba. Let me know in the comment section down below, and we'll make a point to cover more of those players. Click the like and subscribe button while you're down there too.
But what are the value combos that
Like I said,
Mateos is betting is what Ivey's
probably
wondering.
like King X or better. Maybe a hand like Queen Jack or Ace Jack. I'm not as sure with this sizing.
Going to the time banks is Ivey, and
I
of
think
course for Adrian, we don't love to see it.
Yeah, I think Queen Jack and Ace Jack can get in here and do it, just with the idea that Ivey's going to value bet his King X most of the time on the river as played, with like check, call, turn, check, river. I think Adrian can get as far as Queen Jack or Ace Jack here for value. Those can definitely get value from Ivey having hands like Jack 9 and Jack 10 that might opt to check call. So, and Mateo's definitely good enough to bet, you know, pot here or whatever with a hand like Ace Jack. It's thin. Again, if you're not uncomfortable value betting, sometimes
But
you're not playing the game.
he's also good enough to be bluffing in this line, and that's
of
what Ivy
course.
realizes, and what he's asking himself is this one of those times?
This is a tough call, guys. Yeah, he doesn't make it. It's a tough call. And that's we can see why he's called out Conquistador right there. It's a good bluff. I like it.
It is, and I don't think we can find fault in Ivy folding 7 so lean.
After a lot of thought, Ivy lets it go, and you certainly can't fault him given he loses to a lot of hands in the situation. But maybe his spidey senses were going off. It didn't feel quite right. But with a bad pair, there's often not a whole lot you can do. That said, this is a spot where if Mateos did have random ace high, ace 9, ace 6, ace 5, ace 2, maybe queen 10, queen 9 that didn't bet the turn, this is a spot where I think you'd probably jam the river. So if there ever is a spot to find a hero call with a really junky pair, this could be it. I, Jonathan Little, personally love watching the old school players and the new school players get in there and battle against each other. I love seeing a clash of styles. I love seeing a battle of wits, and poker allows us to do that on a regular basis. It's a wonderful game.